Fixing dents in aluminum boats really isn't all that hard. It's all the same process, no matter what boat it is. It's all pretty much the same, as long as it's just a dent, not a hole. This is how I do it. I rough up the damage. You got to get rid of the paint and whatnot. This is a good way to find dents. You just I use a paint stick with some 80 grit and just go flat across it, and you'll be able to see where the low spots are. The low spot is, then obviously the dent, and then you'll know where to grind and where to fill. It works pretty good. It just lets you see where where the low spots are, and then once you find where the low spots are, then you would grind the paint out of there. I use an 80 grit grinder, or you can use just a fiber disc. But grind it up. It all has to be perfectly nice and clean, and the bigger the tooth, the better. So even 36 grits, good, that'll have a hold on. And I'm using a little die grinder just to make sure I get so there's no metal that isn't perfectly clean. You gotta, of course, be careful. You don't want to go through, obviously, but just roughing it up anyway. And then once you get it roughed up. Oh, here's some more dents. Again, you can see how easy it is to find it, to see where they are. And again, rough it up and make sure, it's all nice and clean down to bare metal. And then when it comes to putting in body filler, the first I use is a waterproof short strand fiberglass. You can use like Duraglass, what's another one? Easy Glass, Bondo glass. I use a fair bit of Bondo glass because I can find it everywhere. You can buy it at Walmart. I'm not sure if that's what this is, but it may well be, but it may be Duraglass. I don't know. Bondo glass is a little bit harder, but you can see I tape it off because I don't want to get the Bondo where I don't have to sand it off. It's less sanding when you just take the time to tape it off good, and make sure you get your corners good. That's one thing. That's what I'm doing here. You go one direction, then you go the other direction, and that makes a pretty straight corner. Makes it a lot easier. And then when it comes to Bondo, quit when you're ahead. I'm using the word Bondo loosely, just as body filler per se. So I'll put on the waterproof filler, and then sand that out. And I tend to use 80 grit. Sometimes I'll start with 36, but I like to use 80 grit. And the main thing is just be sure you're not sanding away the aluminum. You just want to sand the filler down to the aluminum. Because you can sand away aluminum. You can, make the hull thinner. So what I was showing there is no boat is perfectly flat. So when it gets kind of close, I use a flexible block, a semi-flexible block to just finish it off, because no boat is perfect. It's never going to be perfectly flat. Here I'm using an air file just to speed up the process, but the idea is the same. It's just a block to make it flat. Especially be careful on the corners. Again, it's so easy to sand away aluminum, when I say corners, I should say edges. So, and then I make sure that's all roughed up. Everything, all the Bondo, even if it's low, still needs to have some sanding grit in it, some sanding marks. And now we're just onto the back spot, but same thing, 36 or 80 grit. Rough it up good. Make sure, get it as flat as you can. Again, I think you can see I just switched blocks. I make it as flat as I can with the hard block, then go to a flexible block, and then I tape it off again. Now I'll go with a final filler. I like to use a Evercoat product called Metal Glaze. This is not, I'm not sure exactly what this one is, because they all look kind of the same, but it's a final filler or a glaze. This may be an Evercoat product, or it also maybe, I get one from O'Reilly Auto Parts that works pretty good. I wish I could think of the name of it. Maybe I'll put it in the description. But it works pretty good. You get it at O'Reilly. But this is just a final fill. This is just for kind of any minor lows and, filling in all the sanding scratches. And then, again, I tape it off because I don't want to sand more than I have to. And I also like having the high line there, because then it tells you when to stop at the aluminum. And again, usually I'll start this with 80 grit. and a semi-rigid block, not necessarily a rigid block anymore, at 80 grit. But then I like to go down to 220. 220 is where I find is a really good grit for just prior to putting on primer. And aluminum is a little bit different. Sanding primer doesn't stick directly to it. If I have a fair bit of exposed aluminum, I'll put an epoxy primer on first. This one only had just a few spots, so then I'll use a self-etching primer. Now you can see, I got it. Make sure you wipe it down real good. There's self-etching primer. I use SEM, and it just needs a couple little spots where the bare aluminum is. You don't have to cover the whole thing. It just has to be there. And that gives a spot for, this is sanding primer. I use a 2K primer. This is Shopline PPG primer. But this is the primer that will fill in all your sanding scratches and provide a nice flat surface for the paint job. And I like to put on a few coats of it. I put it on there, fairly heavy. It's good stuff. And that gun that I'm using is just a Harbor Freight gun, probably $29.99. They work plenty good for most purposes. And this is a guide coat. You don't necessarily have to use it. You can actually use spray paint. Black spray paint would be good too. But it just lets you see when you're sanding. And now for prep work on paint, I use 400. Sometimes I'll even go to 600, but I like using 400. And all you're trying to do is sand off. Once all of the guide coat is gone, then it's perfectly flat and ready for the top coat, ready for paint. And you can see I didn't spray the primer all the way up to the line, and the reason being is I didn't want to build a heavy line, so that there wouldn't be something you could kind of catch your finger on. I wanted to keep it pretty thin. I just used two different guns here. One, because my big gun wouldn't fit under there, so I used that small gun to do the bottom, big one to do the top. Again, that's a Harbor Freight gun at $39.99. They work good for 90% of what you do. They're good. And I do put an extra piece of tape there and peel that off when it's still wet. You got to be careful, of course, peeling this off. I'm not sure if this was right when, I highly doubt I did it then. This was probably, hours later or the next day where I peeled off all of the tape. And then after that, I gave it a little wipe down naturally, and then, put on a stripe. I got this stripe, I believe, right from the factory. I don't quite remember, but usually anytime you can call the manufacturer or call a dealer, tell them your hull number, tell them the part you need, they can get you the stripe. The stripe goes on, fairly easy. You just want to make sure you do it in long sections, otherwise it looks real wiggly. But that's just about it. Nothing to it. I mean, every aluminum boat's the same. Just, fill it, prime it, paint it, and call it a day. So thanks for watching.